Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today, we bring you a story full of surprises and hidden angles that few people know about. Don't leave just yet. Just when you think you've figured it all out, there are fascinating and meaningful details waiting for you at the end of the video. Let's explore together and uncover the special message this video has for you. Are you ready? Let's get started. A notorious motorcycle gang made a critical mistake when they chose to vandalize a young nurse's car in the quiet parking lot of a small-town hospital. What they couldn't have known was that her brother wasn't just any overprotective sibling. He was Marcus Reynolds, a decorated Navy SEAL with 15 years of elite special operations experience. By the time Marcus was finished, the infamous Devil's Hand Motorcycle Club would regret ever crossing the wrong family. Before we dive back into the story, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if this tale grabs your attention, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow, I've got something even more thrilling in store for you. Under the harsh glow of St. Michael's Community Hospital's fluorescent lights, Sarah Reynolds wrapped up her third consecutive night shift in the ICU. Her delicate features betrayed her exhaustion, dark circles framing her green eyes after another grueling 16-hour rotation spent tending to critically ill patients. The late October air carried a biting chill, prompting Sarah to clutch her worn Navy scrubs tighter around her slender frame. "You really should get some rest, Sarah," Dr. Patricia Chin called out, catching up to her favorite nurse. "That trauma case today was brutal. I don't know how you stayed so calm with everything going sideways." Sarah mustered a tired smile, pulling her keys from a frayed backpack. Someone had to keep their head on straight. That's what night shift nurses do. We handle the impossible while everyone else sleeps. Cedar Ridge, once a thriving mining town, had fallen on hard times. The collapse of the coal industry left many residents without work, and rising unemployment paved the way for crime to flourish. The Devil's Hand Motorcycle Club had steadily seized control of the struggling town, their intimidation and illegal operations casting a long shadow over its streets. As Sarah approached her white Honda Civic, parked alone at the edge of the lot, the distinct rumble of approaching motorcycles echoed ominously off the brick walls of the hospital. "Sarah, wait." Dr. Chin's voice rang out, tinged with urgency. Everyone in town recognized the sound. The gang had grown more brazen, their extortion and drug deals spreading unchecked. For motorcycles roared into view, circling Sarah's car like predators cornering prey. Their riders wore black leather vests emblazoned with the gang's emblem, a crimson demon's hand clutching a flaming skull. The leader, a hulking man with a graying beard and cold eyes, dismounted first. His patch identified him as Blade, the gang's president. Well, Blade's voice was a low growl that carried across the lot. "If it isn't our favorite little nurse. You thought refusing to falsify those medical records for us was smart. Huh? Pretty little car you've got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." Sarah's heart raced, but she stood her ground. The records Blade referred to would have hidden evidence of domestic abuse. "I took an oath to help people," she said evenly, "not to cover up crimes." Dr. Chin's fingers hovered nervously over her phone's keypad, but she hesitated, knowing the local police wouldn't arrive in time. Cedar Ridge law enforcement, either corrupt or terrified, often turn a blind eye to the gang's reign of terror. "Your brother's not here to play hero anymore, is he?" Blade sneered, yanking a heavy chain from his saddlebag. "Heard he's off playing soldier somewhere. Nobody left to protect you now." What Blade didn't realize was that Sarah had received a message earlier that evening, a message that changed everything. After 3 years of classified missions, Marcus Reynolds was home. He'd seen the decline of Cedar Ridge through Sarah's increasingly worried texts and decided it was time to intervene. As Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, Blade's chain swung in a vicious arc, shattering her car's headlight with a spray of glass. The other bikers joined in, their chains and boots reducing the vehicle to a wreck in minutes. Dr. Chun gasped in horror. "Stop! I'm calling the police!" she shouted. "Go ahead," one of the bikers laughed. "See how long it takes them to show up. This is Devil's Hand territory now." But what the gang didn't know was that Marcus Reynolds wasn't just back in town. He was already on his way. And when he arrived, they'd learned the hard way that they'd picked the wrong family to threaten. As Sarah watched the destruction of her car unfold, an unexpected calm washed over her, a calm she recognized from her years in the ICU, where clarity often came in moments of chaos. It was the same lesson Marcus had drilled into her during their childhood. The darkest moments often herald change. This wasn't the devil's hand silencing her. It was the spark that would ignite something far greater. Because Marcus Reynolds hadn't just spent 15 years mastering combat. He'd learned to dismantle criminal empires, turn fear into resolve, and teach entire communities how to stand tall against tyranny. When the gang rode off into the night, leaving her car in ruins as a warning, Sarah finally pulled out her phone. The message waiting for her was simple. Just got into town. Need a ride home? Despite the destruction around her, a small smile crept across her face. The devil's hand had no idea what they'd just set in motion, or who they'd just provoked. By the time Marcus Reynolds arrived at St. Michael's, a small crowd of hospital staff had gathered. His rental car's headlights illuminated the grim scene. Shattered glass scattered across the lot, the Honda's panels dented and scarred, and crimson handprints spray-painted, like a twisted signature on the hood. But what struck Marcus most wasn't the damage. It was Sarah. Amid the chaos, she stood with a quiet determination that spoke volumes. Marcus stepped out of the car, his 6-foot frame moving with a precision that hinted at his military background, even in casual jeans and a gray Henley. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, absorbing every detail. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked, pulling her into a firm embrace. "I'm fine," she replied, though frustration tinged her voice. "But this isn't about me anymore, Marcus. The devil's hand, they're destroying this town. Last week, they put one of my patients in the ICU because his dad couldn't pay their protection fee. The police called it an accident." Dr. Chan approached hesitantly, her usual composed demeanor faltering. "Your brother picked a good time to come home, Sarah. Things are worse than ever. The mayor's threatening budget cuts to the hospital, but we all know it's the devil's hand pulling the strings. They want their people on the board." Marcus listened in silence, his expression neutral, though his mind was already mapping out the situation. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Sarah bent to pick up a shard of her windshield. "It started small about a year ago. They were just another motorcycle club. Then Blade took over. Now they control everything: drugs, construction contracts, even the police. Anyone who stands up to them ends up in my ER," she added grimly. "Or worse." Dr. Chin interjected softly. A police cruiser rolled into the lot, its lights off. Officer Pete Davidson stepped out, his slumped shoulders and weary eyes betraying his unease. "Sarah," he sighed, pulling out his notepad. "I heard about the disturbance, but unless you've got solid evidence." "We saw them." "Pete," Dr. Chun interrupted, exasperated. "Blade was here. We all know it." Davidson shook his head, his frustration palpable. "You know how this works, Dr. Chun? No video, no independent witnesses willing to testify." His voice trailed off as his eyes fell on Marcus. "You must be your brother. Military. Former Navy." Marcus replied evenly, revealing nothing about his SEAL background. He'd learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. As Davidson took statements destined to go nowhere, Marcus studied the scene. The resignation in Dr. Chen's voice, the fear etched into Davidson's posture, and the staff hurrying to their cars, avoiding attention. But beneath the despair, he noticed something else. The faint glimmers of hope in the way people glanced at Sarah, refusing to back down. "I'll file the insurance claim tomorrow," Sarah said as Davidson left. "Can you give me a ride home?" Marcus's reply was calm, but resolute. "First, we're stopping at Mike's Diner. I need to understand exactly what's happening here." Dr. Chun tensed at the mention of the diner. "That's their territory, especially at night. Be careful. All the more reason to go," Marcus said firmly. The best way to understand an opponent is to walk into their backyard. As they drove through Cedar Ridge, the town's decline became painfully evident. Once bustling shops were boarded up, their windows cracked and covered with security grates. Streets that had once thrived now felt hollow, haunted by a community living in fear. But beneath that fear Marcus sensed something simmering, an unspoken resistance, waiting for a spark. "You're planning something," Sarah observed, recognizing the focused expression she'd seen so often before. "This town raised us after Mom and Dad died," Marcus replied, pulling into the diner's lot. "It gave us everything. Now it's time to pay that debt back." 3 motorcycles gleamed under the fluorescent lights outside Mike's diner, a silent declaration of territory. The message was unmistakable. This was Devil's Hand turf. But as Marcus and Sarah stepped out of the car, their presence sent a message of its own. Sometimes standing up to bullies starts with refusing to bow to fear. "You know this could get messy," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the warning. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Counting on it, sis. Sometimes things need to break before they can get fixed." The bell over the diner's door chimed as they walked in, announcing more than their arrival. It marked the beginning of a shift that would ripple through Cedar Ridge. Tonight, in this small-town diner, a Navy SEAL and his nurse sister were about to show their community how to reclaim what had been stolen. Mike's diner had changed since Marcus last sat at its worn counter years ago. Once a bustling haven for miners and hospital staff, it now bore the marks of the town's decline. Cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, defying state regulations, and the few patrons spoke in hushed tones, their eyes averted. At the prime booth near the entrance sat 3 Devil's Hand prospects. Their leather vests, marked with the club's insignia, announced their rookie status. As Marcus and Sarah entered, their predatory gazes followed, noting the siblings' lack of fear, a reaction they weren't accustomed to. Sarah Reynolds, Mike Harrison's weathered face lit up faintly as the siblings approached the counter. The 60-year-old owner had been a close friend of their parents, and his diner had once served as a second home during their difficult teenage years. But now his proud posture was bent under the weight of protection fees and dwindling customers. "Evening, Mike," Marcus greeted, choosing a seat with clear sight lines to both the door and the kitchen exit. Sarah sat beside him, her eyes catching the fresh bruises on Mike's forearm, a silent testament to a recent confrontation. "Place has changed," Marcus remarked, his tone neutral. Mike's eyes darted nervously toward the bikers. "Everything changes. Coffee's still the same, though. On the house for you too." Before Marcus could respond, one of the prospects rose from the booth, stretching ostentatiously before swaggering over to the counter. His vest bore the name Razor, a moniker that seemed more aspirational than earned. "Mike," Razor drawled, his tone heavy. With forced bravado, "You know the rules about giving away product without clearing it first." Marcus's sharp eyes took in the biker's stance, noting the telltale bulge of a poorly concealed weapon at his waistband. Amateur placement, slow draw, he assessed silently. Sarah tensed slightly beside him, but remained composed, her years of handling aggressive patience guiding her reaction. "It's just coffee, Razor," Mike began, but the prospect cut him off. "It's about respect." Razor leaned against the counter, deliberately invading Sarah's personal space. "Speaking of respect, I heard what happened to your car, nurse. Real shame about that. But that's what happens when people forget their place in the new order." Marcus took a measured sip of coffee, his movements deliberate. "New order," he repeated softly. Interesting choice of word from someone still wearing training wheels. The diner fell silent. The other 2 prospects shifted in their seats, hands drifting toward their weapons. Even Mike stepped back, sensing the tension escalate. Razor's face flushed red. "What did you say?" he snarled. "Prospect Patch," Marcus clarified, still not looking at him. 6 months minimum before you're a full member, right? Assuming you make the cut. That's why you're here at midnight, shaking down diner owners, instead of running with the real players. Sarah watched her brother, realizing his intent. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but his words carried a calculated weight. He wasn't just confronting Razor. He was dismantling his authority piece by piece. "You don't know who you're messing with," Razor snapped, his voice rising in frustration. Marcus finally turned to face him, his gaze unflinching. The Devil's Hand wouldn't send prospects for anything important. "So either this is a test, or you're acting without authorization. Which is it?" The other prospects exchanged uneasy glances, their their practiced intimidation routine unraveling under Marcus's scrutiny. "You're the nurse's brother," one of them ventured. The military guy Blade mentioned. "Former Navy," Marcus confirmed, his tone disinterested. "Now I'm just a concerned citizen wondering why grown men need to vandalize cars and shake down diners to feel important." Razor's hand twitched toward his waistband. "Let me show you what we do to concerned citizens." The next moments unfolded too quickly for most to follow. 1 second, Razor was reaching for his weapon. The next, he was face down on the counter, his arm twisted behind him at an angle that promised dislocation. His pistol lay disassembled on the counter, its magazine and chambered round neatly removed. "Basic firearm safety," Marcus remarked, his voice calm and detached. "Always maintain positive control of your weapon. Never draw unless you're ready to use it." He applied a fraction more pressure, eliciting a gasp from Razor. "Are you ready to commit to this course of action?" The other prospects froze, their weapons suddenly feeling heavy and useless. Sarah observed with professional interest, noting how Marcus's positioning maximized leverage while minimizing injury risk. "Here's how this is going to go," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "You're going to leave. Now. And you're going to tell Blade that Cedar Ridge isn't his playground anymore." The silence that followed wasn't just compliance. It was the first crack in the devil's hand's stranglehold over the town. The 3 motorcycles outside Mike's diner gleamed like sentinels under the fluorescent lights, a bold proclamation of the devil's hand's dominance. But as Marcus and Sarah stepped out of the car, their message was just as clear. "Fear stops here. You realize they'll retaliate," Sarah said softly, though her steps never faltered. Marcus gave her a faint smile, his tone steady. "They will. And that's the point. Sometimes you have to disrupt the balance to force change." Inside, the diner was unusually quiet, the tension thick enough to cut. Razor and his fellow prospects sat huddled in their booth, visibly seething as Marcus and Sarah walked past them. The confrontation from earlier still lingered in the air, but it was clear who had left the stronger impression. Marcus's movements were unhurried as he approached the counter. "You're going to tell Blade that Mike's diner is under new protection. And more importantly," his voice dropped just enough to carry weight, "you're going to remember that some things cost more than they're worth." With a sharp push, Marcus released Razor, who stumbled back into his companions. The unloaded pistol remained on the counter, a quiet testament to competence and control. Without a word, the prospects retreated, their attempts at dignity crumbling under the weight of their failure. Marcus turned back to his coffee as if nothing had happened. "Sorry about the commotion, Mike. What do I owe you for the coffee?" Mike stared, wide-eyed, at the scene that had just unfolded. "On the house," he said quickly. "Definitely on the house." Sarah placed a hand on her brother's arm. "You know they'll be back. With more people." Marcus leaned back slightly, a faint smirk on his face. "Counting on it. They need to understand consequences before we move on to Phase 2. "Phase 2? Mike asked, still incredulous. "Community organization," Marcus replied. "The only reason gangs like the Devil's Hand succeed is because they convince everyone to stand alone. It's time Cedar Ridge remembers what standing together looks like." Outside, the prospects' motorcycles roared into the night, their riders eager to report to Blade. As Sarah watched Marcus calmly sip his coffee, she realized this had been his plan all along. Sometimes, the best way to dismantle a bully's power was to show others that resistance wasn't futile. The story of what happened at Mike's diner spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. By the time Sarah returned to the hospital for her next shift, it had already morphed into legend, each retelling growing more dramatic, but holding firm to its core truth. Someone had finally stood up to the Devil's Hand. "Is it true?" Amanda Torres, a young ER nurse, cornered Sarah in the locker room. "They're saying your brother disarmed 3 bikers without breaking a sweat. And her voice dropped, that he's some kind of special forces operative?" Sarah kept her expression neutral as she tied her scrubs. "My brother just showed them intimidation only works if you let it." She carefully avoided confirming or denying anything about Marcus's background, knowing he preferred to let others draw their own conclusions. Dr. Chun arrived moments later, her usual calm energy replaced by barely contained excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this." She held up her phone, displaying texts from local business owners. "Mike's been talking. 3 other shops on Oak Street have refused to pay this month's protection fees. They're saying if Mike can stand up to them, so can they." Even hospitals seemed different. Staff walked taller, spoke louder, and patients whispered about how the devil's hand might not be invincible after all. But Sarah knew better than to celebrate too early. During her lunch break, she called Marcus, who had spent the morning reconnecting with old contacts in town. "It's starting," she said. "People are talking about fighting back." "Phase 1, Marcus replied, his tone calm but focused. "Blade's not going to let this go. He's calling in favors and gathering his strength. He has to make an example to maintain control. The real test is whether the town holds firm when that happens." As if on cue, Sarah heard the rumble of motorcycles in the background. "Where are you?" "Thompson's Hardware," Marcus replied. "Jimmy Thompson just refused to pay their fee. Blade sent some enforcers to make an example. I might need your medical kit in about 10 minutes." Sarah grabbed her gear and headed out. "Marcus, don't do anything reckless. Nothing reckless about teaching people to defend themselves," he said before hanging up. When Sarah arrived, the scene was already drawing a crowd. 2 Devil's Hand enforcers lay on the ground, one clutching a shoulder, the other nursing a sprained wrist. Marcus was calmly administering first aid while a shaken but resolute Jimmy Thompson stood nearby, gripping a baseball bat. "They came in swinging chains," Jimmy explained to the gathering crowd. "Said they'd burn the place down. Benny," Jimmy gestured at Marcus. In his voice, just took them apart. Marcus stood, addressing not just Jimmy, but the growing crowd. "Their strength isn't real. It's based on fear, on making you believe you're powerless. But fear has weaknesses just like the human body. When you understand those weaknesses, their size and strength don't matter. What matters is knowledge and the will to stand." Phones captured every word, every movement, ensuring there would be no dismissing this moment as hearsay. Sarah worked quickly, ensuring the injured enforcers would recover, while noting how the crowd seemed emboldened by her brother's composure. "It's not about fighting," Sarah told Jimmy as she wrapped an enforcer's wrist, loud enough for the others to hear. "It's about understanding. Understanding your power and refusing to let others take it from you." When the police arrived, something was different this time. Witnesses stepped forward. Phones continued recording. The enforcers, used to being untouchable, were actually charged. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus addressed those who remained. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice firm. "It's about knowing that no one has to stand alone. The Devil's Hand thrives on isolation, but look around. You're not alone anymore." Back at the hospital, Dr. Chun shared even more updates. 2 neighborhoods are organizing watches. People are installing cameras, sharing contact lists. It's like they were just waiting for someone to show them it's possible. "It's not about fighting back," Sarah said softly, echoing Marcus's words. "It's about standing together. The Devil's Hand thrives on fear, but fear is powerless against a community that learns to stand together." That realization echoed through Sarah's mind as her hospital shift progressed. Though the increasing presence of Devil's Hand bikers circling the hospital on their motorcycles was impossible to ignore, Blade wasn't wasting time. He was rallying his forces, determined to remind Cedar Ridge why the Devil's Hand was feared. The true test of the town's resolve was looming, and Sarah wondered if the newfound courage she'd seen would endure. That evening, a message from Marcus arrived. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. Time to show them what a united community looks like. The morning brought grim news that made Sarah's hands tremble as she poured her coffee. Social media channels buzzed with reports of coordinated attacks across Cedar Ridge. 3 businesses that had refused protection payments woke to shattered windows, a clear message of the cost of defiance. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his expression sharp with focus as he marked locations on a town map. His laptop displayed security footage of the attacks, showing teams of bikers moving with alarming precision. "They're coordinated," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "Military-style precision. Someone in their leadership has tactical training." "This isn't just Blade," Sarah noted. leaning over his shoulder. Is it? No, Marcus confirmed. Blades brought in reinforcements, probably from other chapters. I count at least 30 new operators, likely with military backgrounds. They're not just trying to scare the town anymore. They're preparing to take full control. A knock at the door interrupted them. Through the peephole, Sarah saw Officer Davidson, looking more strained than usual. She opened the door, noting his nervous glances over his shoulder. It's worse than vandalism, Davidson said, declining the coffee she offered. They've taken over the old mining complex on the outskirts. I've seen them moving weapons, setting up communications equipment. It's a full-blown operations center. This is bigger than anything they've done before. Marcus nodded grimly. They're consolidating power. The community's resistance forced their hand and accelerated their plans. They're overreaching, which works in our favor. Davidson sighed. The mayor's called an emergency council meeting, but half the council's in their pocket. The other half's too scared to act. They're talking about passing new ordinances, curfews, restrictions on public gatherings, all under the guise of public safety. Sarah's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Chun. The hospital board just received an ultimatum. Allow the Devil's Hand to place their own security team on site or face attacks targeting staff families. Marcus stood, his movements deliberate. Good. They're showing their hand too early. Now we can implement phase 2 properly. Turning to Davidson, Marcus asked, how many officers still remember what it means to protect and serve? Davidson straightened slightly. More than you'd think, but they're hesitant without solid support. You'll have it, Marcus assured him. But we need to buy time. Sarah, tell Dr. Chun to have the board delay their decision by 24 hours. Davidson, quietly let the officers you trust know to be ready, but stay covert for now. Sarah recognized the shift in her brother's demeanor. The same focused intensity she'd seen in videos of him training SEAL recruits. What exactly is Phase 2? Community mobilization, Marcus explained. The Devil's Hand thinks fear and force can keep this town in line, but they've forgotten something about small towns. Information flows both ways. Every person they've terrorized, every bribe they've paid, every corrupt official they've bought, it all leaves traces. He tapped his phone, revealing an encrypted messaging app. While they've been gathering forces, I've been building a network. Business owners, hospital staff, honest cops, former miners, anyone tired of living in fear. We've documented everything, building cases and patterns. But evidence alone isn't enough. Why not? Davidson asked skeptically. The system's corrupt. That's why we're not just gathering evidence. Marcus said with a grim smile. We're preparing to release it all at once, from multiple, undeniable sources. But first, we need them to overextend. Sarah nodded, beginning to understand. Let them think they're winning. Make them overconfident. Exactly, Marcus agreed. Their show of force isn't strength, it's desperation. In their rush to crush resistance, they'll expose their weaknesses. The next evening, Cedar Ridge braced for the Devil's Hand's retaliation. By the time Sarah reached Thompson's Hardware, the town was already buzzing with the aftermath of another confrontation. 2 enforcers lay on the ground, subdued but alive, while Marcus calmly administered first aid. Jimmy Thompson, shaken but unbroken, stood nearby with a baseball bat still clutched in his hands. They came in swinging chains, Jimmy explained to the gathering crowd. So they burned the place down. Then he nodded at Marcus, took them apart. Marcus addressed the onlookers, his voice steady and commanding. Their strength isn't real. It's built on fear, on convincing you that you're alone. But look around, you're not alone. Phones recorded every word, ensuring the moment wouldn't be ignored or suppressed. Sarah, tending to the injured enforcers, spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. It's not about fighting back. It's about understanding your power. When you refuse to live in fear, you take that power away from them. As the police arrived, something shifted. Witnesses stepped forward. Videos were shared. The enforcers were charged, their impunity crumbling under the weight of evidence and community resolve. Back at the hospital, Dr. Chun shared more news. 2 neighborhoods are organizing watch groups. Businesses are pooling resources for security systems. It's like everyone was waiting for a sign. Sarah smiled, recalling Marcus's words. It's not just about fighting back. It's about standing together. Cedar Ridge had done more than resist the devil's hand. It had become a blueprint for how communities could reclaim their power. The strength of a united town wasn't just enough to repel intimidation. It became a model for building resilience, proving that no force of fear could stand against the resolve of a people who refused to stand alone. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update, Marcus said with a subtle smile, leaning back in his chair. We should warn people, Sarah insisted, her voice tight with urgency. We will, Marcus assured her, his tone steady. But not to hide, to prepare. Sometimes you have to let the enemy think they're springing a trap, when really... His phone buzzed, interrupting him. He glanced at the screen, his expression sharpening. They're gathering at the mining complex. It's time to show them what a prepared community looks like. As if to punctuate his words, the distant roar of motorcycle engines echoed across the town. The Devil's Hand was mobilizing their full strength, ready to crush Cedar Ridge's defiance in one decisive blow. But as Sarah watched her brother calmly check his equipment and coordinate with his network, she realized this overwhelming show of force might be the exact catalyst they needed, a spark to unite the community in ways the Devil's Hand never anticipated. The afternoon's sun cast long, slanting shadows across Cedar Ridge as Marcus finalized his plans. The old mining complex, once a thriving symbol of the town's prosperity, now served as a fortress for the Devil's Hand. Through his binoculars, Marcus observed a steady stream of motorcycles arriving, their numbers swelling with reinforcements from neighboring chapters. He counted at least 50 additional members, confirming what he'd already suspected. The Devil's Hand was throwing everything they had into this operation. At the hospital, Sarah's shift was tense, underscored by the relentless sound of motorcycles circling the building. Dr. Chen joined her at the nurse's station, her expression tight with concern. They've stationed men at every hospital entrance, she said. Staff members are afraid to leave, and ambulances are being stopped and searched. Your brother's plan better work. Sarah kept her composure, updating patient charts with steady hands. Marcus says their visibility is their weakness. The more they show themselves, the more evidence we gather. Across town, Marcus's network was quietly at work. Security cameras at local shops captured gang members conducting inspections, while hospital staff discreetly photographed. Bikers interfering with medical services. Even school teachers reported intimidation attempts at dismissal, adding to the growing pile of evidence. At the police station, Officer Davidson worked with trusted colleagues, carefully observing which officers were suspiciously passive. They're so focused on flexing their strength, he reported via a secure channel, that they're exposing their entire operation. From his position in the abandoned Carson warehouse, Marcus had an unobstructed view of the mining complex. Using his surveillance equipment, he intercepted communications, piecing together the Devil's Hand's plans. That evening, he briefed Sarah during her dinner break. They're planning something big for midnight, he said. Blades mobilized every available member. They're targeting the hospital, the police station, city hall, and key businesses that have resisted them. A simultaneous strike to crush any remaining hope of resistance. Sarah swallowed hard. The hospital? Yes, Marcus confirmed. It's a primary target. But what the Devil's Hand didn't realize was that their massive mobilization created vulnerabilities. With so many members concentrated on their show of force, their patrol routes were weakened, and their focus on intimidation left operational security in tatters. Updates from Marcus's network poured in. Jimmy Thompson had documented illegal weapons shipments. Mike from the diner had recorded conversations about protection rackets. Even hospital staff had preserved evidence of attempts to falsify medical records. Everything's in place, Marcus told Sarah. When they make their move tonight, they'll learn that fear works both ways. Sometimes the hunted become the hunters. As night fell, Cedar Ridge braced for what was to come. The Devil's Hand's presence was overwhelming. Motorcycles patrolling in formation, members stationed at key locations, and the oppressive hum of intimidation in the air. Yet beneath the surface, something else stirred. Shop owners exchanged knowing glances. Hospital staff moved with quiet determination. Citizens discreetly shared information through Marcus's secure network, building a coordinated response. Remember, Marcus broadcasted to his network, "When they move tonight, stick to the plan. Don't engage directly. Document everything. Let them think their show of force is working. The bigger they go, the harder they'll fall." Sarah ended her shift early, following Marcus's instructions to ensure key personnel were in position. As she drove home, the darkening streets amplified the tension. The Devil's Hand believed they were preparing to deliver a final message of power and fear. They didn't realize they were about to face a very different lesson, one about unity and courage. At precisely midnight, the Devil's Hand launched their coordinated assault. The roar of motorcycles shattered the night's calm as gang members moved with military precision toward their targets. It was a bold, calculated display of dominance, intended to crush the spirit of resistance once and for all. Sarah stationed herself at St. Michael's emergency entrance, outwardly calm but internally alert. 3 bikers, heavily muscled and armed, set up a blockade at the hospital's entrance. Across town, similar scenes played out at City Hall, the police station, and Defiant businesses. What the Devil's Hand hadn't anticipated was that the community had already turned the tables. Every move they made was captured, on cameras, through eyewitness accounts, and in detailed logs compiled by Marcus's network. Evidence of their criminal activities was now flooding secure servers, ready to be released to local media, state authorities, and federal agencies. As Marcus had predicted, the Devil's Hand's desperate overreach became their downfall. The people of Cedar Ridge didn't meet intimidation with brute force. They countered it with resilience, organization, and the undeniable power of a united front. In the end, the Devil's Hand wasn't just defeated, it was dismantled. Cedar Ridge had proven that the strength of a community isn't measured in muscle or weapons, but in solidarity and the will to protect one another. Through their efforts, the town transformed itself into a beacon of hope and a model for resistance, proving that even the strongest chains of fear can be broken when people stand together. Through her earpiece, Sarah heard Marcus's calm, measured voice. Primary targets confirmed: hospital, police station, City Hall, and Thompson's Hardware. All are under simultaneous approach. Phase 2 initiative is now active. All units maintain documentation protocols. Inside the hospital, Dr. Chun had already implemented their preparedness plan. Security cameras recorded from every angle, and staff members discreetly activated body cameras that Marcus had provided. Every act of intimidation, every word spoken, was being captured with perfect clarity. The hospital's emergency room doors swung open, and Blade strode in, his massive frame dominating the entrance. Flanked by his most trusted lieutenants, he exuded an air of artificial confidence, his voice booming with authority. "Nobody leaves," he barked. "Nobody enters without our approval." This is what happens when people forget who really runs Cedar Ridge. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, the same tone she used to manage difficult patients. "This is a medical facility. You're interfering with emergency services. That's a federal offense." Blade let out a humorless laugh. "Federal offenses? Look around, nurse. Your brother's little show of resistance ends tonight. We own this town." What Blade didn't realize was that every word, every threat, every act of interference was being recorded from multiple angles. Hospital security cameras, phones discreetly held by staff, and hidden devices strategically placed throughout the building. Every move he made was building a case against him and his gang. Across Cedar Ridge, similar scenes played out. At the police station, corrupt officers stepped aside as Devil's Hand members established control. Officer Davidson, working with his trusted colleagues, documented everything. At Thompson's Hardware, Jimmy Thompson faced down bikers attempting to torch his building, his security cameras streaming the entire event to multiple secure servers. Through monitored radio channels, a gang lieutenant's voice crackled. "Command Center, this is Echo Team. Primary location secured. No resistance encountered." From his surveillance position, Marcus remained calm. "All units, maintain position. Evidence compilation at 70%. Prepare for Phase 2 activation on my mark." The Devil's Hand continued their show of force, placing armed members at major intersections, conducting aggressive patrols, and intimidating anyone who dared resist. What they didn't realize was that every action was being meticulously documented and transmitted to secure locations. At the hospital entrance, an elderly woman pleaded with Blade's men. "Please, my husband needs dialysis." "Should have thought about that before your community decided to resist," Blade sneered, unaware his callous words were being broadcast live to state and federal authorities. Sarah stood her ground, watching as the Devil's Hand became more emboldened in their actions. They believed they were solidifying control, but in reality, they were sealing their fate. Every act of intimidation added weight to the evidence being compiled against them. Marcus's voice cut through the tension in Sarah's earpiece. "Evidence compilation complete. All units, prepare for Phase 2 activation." "Sarah, are you in position?" "Ready," she confirmed, glancing toward Blade and his lieutenants as they huddled near the emergency room entrance, unaware of what was coming. "Phase 2 activation in 3, 2, 1, execute." Suddenly, every phone in Cedar Ridge buzzed simultaneously. Emergency alerts, social media notifications, and text messages carried the same explosive content. Comprehensive documentation of the Devil's Hand's criminal activities. Security footage, financial records, recorded threats, weeks of meticulously compiled evidence was released through multiple channels, televisions in the hospital waiting room, along with every digital display in town, began broadcasting the damning evidence. The footage showed the Devil's Hand's systematic intimidation, corruption, and lawbreaking in stark, undeniable detail. Blade froze as he watched himself on screen, issuing threats and ordering illegal activities. His face contorted with rage, but there was no mistaking the fear creeping into his voice. "What is this?" he demanded, his tone losing its authority. "This," Sarah said calmly, "is what happens when a community stands together. Everything you've done tonight, and for months, has been documented and distributed to state police, the FBI, and media outlets across the country. You can't suppress this. You can't intimidate it away." Outside, sirens wailed. Law enforcement vehicles converged on Cedar Ridge from every direction. State police and federal agents responding to irrefutable evidence of organized crime. The Devil's Hand's greatest show of force had become their undoing. Inside St. Michael's Hospital, Blade's rage gave way to desperation as he watched evidence of his gang's activities accumulate on every screen. Security footage showed gang members interfering with medical services, threatening staff, and terrorizing patients. Across town, similar scenes unfolded. Officers arrested corrupt colleagues, while business owners and citizens shared the broadcasted evidence, ensuring it couldn't be ignored or suppressed. Marcus's voice came through one final time. "All units, hold position. Let them see exactly what they've done to themselves." The storm had broken, but not in the way the Devil's Hand had planned. Their attempt to crush Cedar Ridge had only exposed their vulnerability. The community's resilience, coordination, and unwavering unity had turned the tide, proving that true power lies not in intimidation, but in solidarity. Cedar Ridge wasn't just standing tall, it was showing the world the strength of a united community. Audio recordings detailed explicit threats against hospital administrators, while financial records unveiled a sprawling web of extortion and protection payments. Blade's voice, once filled with confidence, now wavered as he stared at the damning evidence. "This is impossible," he muttered, the edge of authority gone. "You couldn't have documented everything." "A united community sees everything," Sarah replied, her tone calm and professional. "Every business owner you threatened, every person you intimidated, every corrupt official you bribed. They've all been watching, recording, and waiting for this moment. Through her earpiece, Marcus's steady voice came through, a reassuring presence amidst the chaos. State Police Tactical Units R3. Minutes out, FBI Task Force following close behind. All evidence channels are live and redundant backups are in place. Across the hospital, the Devil's Hand members began to falter, their orchestrated show of dominance unraveling. Uncertainty flickered in their expressions as the reality of their situation set in. Their display of force had become a broadcast of their criminal enterprise. Blade's composure fractured. "Shut it down," he barked, gesturing wildly at the hospital screens. "Shut everything down now." "You don't understand," Sarah said, her voice steady, the same tone she used when delivering difficult medical news. "The evidence isn't just here. It's being broadcast across countless platforms, distributed through multiple secure channels. Every attempt you've made to control this town through fear has been documented and shared with authorities at every level." Outside, the first wave of state police tactical units arrived, their movements swift and precise. The gang members stationed at the hospital entrances quickly found themselves face to face with trained officers, backed by irrefutable evidence of their crimes. Through the hospital windows, similar scenes unfolded across Cedar Ridge. At Thompson's Hardware, Jimmy Thompson stood firm as police arrested the bikers who had threatened to destroy his livelihood. At the police station, Officer Davidson and his allies were actively assisting state law enforcement, providing additional proof of corruption and conspiracy. "Boss," one of Blade's lieutenants approached, his earlier bravado replaced by panic. "The mining complex, they're hitting it now. FBI, DEA, ATF, they're seizing everything. All our operations, all our supplies." What was meant to be a symbol of the Devil's Hand's dominance, their fortified operations center at the old mining complex, had become the epicenter of their downfall. Marcus's surveillance network had meticulously documented the site's activities, turning their supposed stronghold into an open case of federal crimes. "This isn't just about tonight," Sarah said, her words cutting through Blade's growing despair. "Every payment, every threat, every act of intimidation over the past months, it's all been documented. The community you tried to oppress has been building this case against you piece by piece." Through her earpiece, Marcus coordinated seamlessly with law enforcement. All evidence channels active. Additional documentation is flowing from multiple sources. Hospital security systems are capturing current events from every angle. The Devil's Hand's show of strength had backfired spectacularly, exposing the breadth of their criminal enterprise. Instead of cementing their control, they had highlighted the resilience of a united community, standing against them. "Cedar Ridge isn't your territory," Sarah declared firmly as tactical teams entered the hospital. "It never was. You made the mistake of thinking fear was stronger than community." Blade's defiance crumbled into resignation as the enormity of his predicament sank in. His organization's largest mobilization had become its greatest vulnerability. Every threat, every act of violence, every moment of intimidation had been documented by a town that refused to submit any longer. As officers methodically secured the hospital and arrested gang members, Sarah remained at her post near the emergency entrance. Her role as a healthcare provider had taught her that true healing often required addressing the root of the problem, and this night was no different. Marcus's voice came through her earpiece one last time. Phase 2 completion confirmed. All evidence channels secure. Cedar Ridge is demonstrating what happens when a community decides to stand against intimidation. The night that was meant to solidify the Devil's Hand's dominance became the moment of their collapse. Their attempt to rule through fear transformed into a vivid demonstration of unity and resistance. By morning, Cedar Ridge had undergone a profound transformation. Law enforcement systematically processed arrested gang members, while evidence teams scoured the mining complex, uncovering detailed records of illegal activities. The scope of the coordinated response exceeded even Marcus's meticulous planning. Sarah, completing an extended shift at St. Michael's Hospital, ensured that every medical record from the night's events was accurately documented. Dr. Chun worked alongside her, their professional composure steady as they processed the enormity of what had unfolded. The hospital board is convening an emergency session. Dr. Chun informed Sarah as they updated charts. With the devil's hand gone, we can finally implement proper security measures. More importantly, staff won't have to fear retaliation for reporting suspicious injuries. Shortly after sunrise, Marcus arrived at the hospital, his coordination with law enforcement complete. As he stepped inside, he and Sarah exchanged a brief but knowing look. Together, they had helped orchestrate something much larger than themselves, a community reclaiming its power. Cedar Ridge had proven that unity, resilience, and determination could dismantle even the most entrenched systems of fear. His tactical expertise had been pivotal in orchestrating the operation's intricate logistics. Final arrest count stands at 73 gang members, Marcus reported calmly, including leadership from 3 separate chapters. The evidence compilation has exceeded federal prosecutors' expectations. The hospital's waiting room, which hours earlier had been a stage for the devil's hand's intimidation, had now been transformed into a temporary command center for law enforcement debriefings. Officer Davidson worked seamlessly with state police, delivering precise details about the gang's operations and identifying corrupted officials entrenched in the town's infrastructure. The mayor has submitted his resignation. Davidson informed the group, his professional tone failing to mask his satisfaction, along with 3 council members and the police chief. The evidence didn't just implicate the devil's hand. It dismantled the entire network of corruption they built. Sarah observed the systematic processing of arrested gang members with clinical detachment. Many required medical attention for minor injuries sustained during their arrests, allowing her to fulfill her professional duties while witnessing the gang's shattered bravado. Blade, once an imposing figure, sat handcuffed in the waiting room, his physical dominance now overshadowed by the crushing weight of evidence against him. "Your brother," Blade muttered as Sarah checked his blood pressure, her professionalism unwavering despite the circumstances. "He planned this from the start, didn't he? Since that first night at Mike's Diner." "The community planned this," Sarah corrected, her tone steady. "Marcus showed us how to coordinate our response effectively. Every person you threatened, every business you tried to control, they all contributed to your downfall." By morning, news crews had arrived, setting up outside the hospital and other key locations in Cedar Ridge. The story of a small town's coordinated resistance against organized crime quickly captured national attention. Marcus, however, ensured that the spotlight remained on collective action rather than individual heroics. "This represents a collaborative effort by Cedar Ridge's citizens," he explained during a law enforcement debriefing. The evidence compilation succeeded because community members chose to systematically document and report criminal activities. The devil's hand's attempt to display dominance merely served as the catalyst for a unified response. Dr. Chun, meanwhile, worked with hospital administration to implement immediate changes. "We're establishing robust security protocols," she announced to the staff. "But more importantly, we're creating support systems for patients and personnel affected by criminal intimidation. This hospital will become a true sanctuary for healing." Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with updates from around town. Mike's Diner had reopened, serving breakfast to first responders and law enforcement. Thompson's Hardware displayed a business-as-usual sign while customers deliberately showed support. Across Cedar Ridge, signs of recovery emerged even as investigations continued. "The federal task force is particularly interested in how we compiled the evidence," Marcus told Sarah during a quiet moment. "The systematic documentation of criminal activities by coordinated civilian observers, combined with secure digital distribution, is being considered as a model for other communities facing similar challenges." Officer Davidson, now acting police chief, began rolling out departmental reforms. "We're instituting new oversight protocols," he reported. "Every officer will undergo additional training and thorough background checks. Rebuilding the community's trust requires transparency and professionalism." As morning fully dawned, Cedar Ridge showcased its resilience. Business owners painted over gang-related graffiti and hung signs expressing solidarity with law enforcement. Hospital staff carried on their duties with renewed determination, turning the chaos of the previous night into a testament to their strength. The town's transformation, from victims of fear to architects of their own protection, was undeniable. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, watching as law enforcement dismantled the last remnants of the Devil's Hands operations. The community has shown its capacity for coordinated resistance, but maintaining this unity will require ongoing vigilance and mutual support. Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. Cedar Ridge hadn't just survived the Devil's Hands attempt at control, it had set a precedent. The events of that night had created a blueprint for other communities to follow, a model of resilience, collaboration, and the power of unity. In the weeks that followed, Cedar Ridge underwent a profound transformation. Federal and state investigations continued to dismantle the Devil's Hands influence, but the town's focus shifted to rebuilding and strengthening the bonds that had made their resistance possible. During her hospital shifts, Sarah noticed the changes in the people around her. Patients and staff carried themselves with renewed confidence, their resilience a reflection of the town's rebirth. The emergency department, once a microcosm of fear and oppression, had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of what a united community could achieve when it refused to bow to intimidation. The hospital board approved sweeping security upgrades, Dr. Chin announced during the morning staff meeting. But more importantly, she added, "We're launching a community health outreach program to provide support services for individuals and families affected by criminal intimidation." As Cedar Ridge transitioned into recovery, Marcus remained a key advisor, collaborating closely with law enforcement to ensure the Devil's Hands criminal infrastructure was systematically dismantled. His military background proved invaluable in identifying and mitigating security vulnerabilities throughout the town. Our evidence compilation methodology has garnered significant attention, Marcus informed Sarah during an evening debrief. Federal agencies are now developing training programs based on our community response model. Cedar Ridge has set a precedent for civilian coordination in combating organized crime. The town's business district emerged as a symbol of resilience. Mike's Diner became an informal hub for citizens to discuss recovery initiatives, while Thompson's Hardware reported a surge in customer traffic as residents deliberately supported businesses that had stood up to the gang. "We're forming a business owners association," Mike announced at a community meeting. Regular communication between establishments, shared security protocols, and mutual support during emergencies. The Devil's Hand thrived because we operated in isolation. That ends now. Officer Davidson, continuing as acting police chief, led reforms emphasizing community engagement. "Law enforcement depends on public trust," he stated during a press conference. "We're implementing transparency protocols, regular community feedback sessions, and enhanced training for all personnel." Sarah's responsibilities expanded as she began coordinating with the new support services established by the hospital. Drawing on her experiences during the Devil's Hand confrontation, she helped design programs to address both physical and emotional trauma. "Recovery goes beyond physical healing," she explained to her nursing staff. "We're implementing comprehensive care protocols to address the medical and psychological impacts of criminal intimidation. This hospital will be a center for community wellness." Meanwhile, the federal investigation uncovered the full extent of the Devil's Hands operations. Prosecutors presented evidence of systematic crimes spanning multiple jurisdictions, while asset forfeiture proceedings dismantled the gang's financial infrastructure. The evidence exceeded prosecutorial requirements, a federal agent told Marcus during their final briefing. Community documentation provided unprecedented insight into organized crime methodology. Cedar Ridge's response model is setting new standards for civilian cooperation with law enforcement. The local government underwent a complete restructuring. With corrupted officials removed, The town council implemented new transparency measures and rigorous oversight protocols. Citizens actively participated in municipal planning sessions, ensuring their voices were heard. We're establishing accountability measures, the interim mayor announced. Regular public audits, enhanced reporting requirements, and direct community involvement in decision-making. Cedar Ridge's administration will reflect and serve its citizens' interests. Marcus's surveillance network evolved into a broader community safety initiative, blending civilian observation with professional security practices. Business owners, healthcare workers, and residents maintained coordinated communication while adhering to legal and privacy standards. Sustained security depends on engagement, Marcus explained during a training session. We're creating response protocols that prioritize prevention through preparedness over confrontation. Subtle, yet significant changes began to ripple through Cedar Ridge. Citizens walked with newfound confidence, engaged openly in public spaces, and demonstrated a greater willingness to report suspicious activities. The community's triumph over the devil's hand had transformed collective behavior. Emergency department statistics are showing promising trends, Dr. Chen reported. There's a decline in assault-related injuries, increased voluntary reporting of suspicious circumstances, and improved patient cooperation with treatment protocols. The absence of criminal intimidation is already improving public health. Even the old mining complex, once the Devil's Hand stronghold, underwent a transformation. Local officials launched redevelopment plans to convert the site into a community center, prioritizing public services and youth programs. This repurposing symbolizes Cedar Ridge's evolution. Marcus said during a planning session, "We're not just removing criminal influence. We're building sustainable resources to prevent future vulnerability." As Cedar Ridge continued its recovery, it became clear that the community had achieved more than simply defeating a criminal organization. They had created a blueprint for collective resistance against systematic intimidation. Their coordinated civilian action, effective documentation, and sustained engagement inspired communities across the country. 1 month after the Devil's Hand's downfall, Cedar Ridge's story began influencing broader conversations about community protection. Law enforcement agencies and civilian organizations sought to learn from their model, integrating the town's strategies into national frameworks for combating organized crime. Cedar Ridge had not only reclaimed its identity, it had set a new standard for resilience and collective strength. Sarah's role expanded far beyond her hospital duties as healthcare organizations sought her expertise in integrating medical services with community safety initiatives. At a regional medical conference, she presented Cedar Ridge's groundbreaking approach to protecting healthcare facilities while ensuring uninterrupted patient access. Medical facilities occupy a unique position within community protection frameworks, she explained to an audience of healthcare administrators. St. Michael's demonstrated how hospitals can act as focal points for coordinated resistance against criminal intimidation, all while upholding professional medical standards. Marcus also became a sought-after consultant, receiving formal requests from multiple law enforcement agencies to advise on community-based security protocols. His military background, combined with Cedar Ridge's successful civilian coordination model, provided invaluable insights into safeguarding vulnerable communities. Effective resistance against organized crime demands sustained civilian engagement, Marcus emphasized during a law enforcement training session. Cedar Ridge succeeded because of systematic documentation paired with a coordinated community response. The evidence compilation was instrumental in securing successful prosecutions. The federal investigation into the Devil's Hand uncovered unexpected connections to criminal networks in neighboring states. Cedar Ridge's documentation protocols were adopted as templates for building cases against these affiliated enterprises, leading to the systematic dismantling of regional crime syndicates. Cedar Ridge's methodology provided unprecedented insights into organized criminal operations, the lead federal prosecutor announced at a press conference. Their model has established new standards for civilian cooperation with law enforcement, resulting in more effective prosecution strategies. Officer Davidson, now permanently appointed as Cedar Ridge's police chief, spearheaded departmental reforms emphasizing community collaboration. His success in restoring public trust caught the attention of law enforcement agencies grappling with similar challenges. Professional law enforcement thrives on active community partnerships, Davidson explained at a police leadership conference. Cedar Ridge demonstrated how coordinated civilian police cooperation enhances public safety while preserving legal standards and professional ethics. The hospital's transformation extended beyond upgraded security measures. Dr. Chun developed comprehensive protocols to identify and address criminal intimidation within healthcare settings, which are soon adopted by medical facilities throughout the region. Healthcare providers must balance patient confidentiality with community protection, Dr. Chun explained during a staff training session. Our experience with the Devil's Hand helped us establish protocols that uphold medical ethics while supporting law enforcement efforts. Local businesses also flourished after the removal of criminal influence. Mike's Diner became a hub of community activity, while Thompson's Hardware expanded its operations to meet increased demand. Criminal intimidation thrives on isolating business owners, Mike explained at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. Cedar Ridge showed that maintaining business operations during a crisis requires systematic community support and protection. Cedar Ridge's governmental reforms set a new standard for municipal transparency and accountability. Regular public audits, enhanced oversight protocols, and active civilian participation in governance ensured the town's administration would reflect its citizens' interests. Effective community protection begins with systematic accountability, the interim mayor emphasized during Municipal Leadership Conference. Cedar Ridge demonstrated how transparent governance supports resistance against criminal intimidation while fostering public trust. Sarah observed the broader impact of these changes during her hospital shifts. Neighboring towns began implementing similar protection protocols in their emergency departments while maintaining high professional standards. These ripple effects go beyond immediate security concerns, she explained to her nursing staff. Our experience showed how healthcare facilities can anchor community resistance while fulfilling their core medical missions. This dual role strengthens both public health and safety. Meanwhile, Marcus continued refining the community protection model, incorporating lessons learned from Cedar Ridge into transferable security protocols. His emphasis on civilian coordination rather than confrontation proved especially valuable for towns facing new criminal threats. Sustainable security requires systematic community engagement, Marcus noted during a security consultation. Cedar Ridge's success demonstrated how coordinated civilian action, backed by professional law enforcement, can effectively protect communities from organized crime. The repurposing of the old mining complex into a community center symbolized Cedar Ridge's transformation and broader influence. Other towns began converting abandoned industrial sites into public facilities, eliminating potential criminal strongholds while enhancing community resources. This redevelopment represents more than just removing criminal influence, Marcus said during a planning session. It's about building sustainable resources that fortify communities against future threats. 3 months after the Devil's Hand's defeat, Cedar Ridge had established itself as a national model for resisting organized crime. The transformation extended beyond immediate security, creating enduring changes in how communities approach collective protection and civic engagement. Sarah's professional responsibilities continued to grow as she consulted with healthcare organizations implementing similar protection measures. At a regional medical administrators conference, she presented St. Michael's comprehensive approach to maintaining medical services while supporting community safety. Integrating healthcare operations with community protection requires a delicate balance, she explained to the gathered professionals. Our experience demonstrated how hospitals can serve as community anchors during crises, ensuring professional standards and patient care remain priorities. Marcus received formal recognition from federal law enforcement agencies for developing a replicable methodology for community protection, solidifying Cedar Ridge's legacy. as a beacon of resilience and coordinated action against organized crime. His systematic approach to civilian coordination became a cornerstone for communities confronting emerging criminal threats. Effective community protection relies on sustainable civilian engagement, Marcus emphasized during a law enforcement training seminar. Cedar Ridge's success was rooted in coordinated documentation and response protocols, which ensured both immediate security and long-term prosecutorial success. The federal investigation expanded its reach, uncovering previously hidden criminal networks across multiple states. Prosecutors adopted Cedar Ridge's documentation protocols to build ironclad cases against affiliated organizations, resulting in the systematic dismantling of regional criminal enterprises. Cedar Ridge's methodology set new standards for civilian law enforcement cooperation, noted the Federal Task Force commander. The insights gained from their model provided an unprecedented understanding of organized criminal operations, enabling more precise and effective intervention strategies. Police Chief Davidson implemented transformative departmental reforms, prioritizing professional standards while maintaining strong ties with the community. His success in rebuilding public trust gained national attention, inspiring law enforcement agencies across the country to adopt similar protocols. Effective policing requires a sustained community partnership, Davidson explained at a National Police Leadership Conference. Cedar Ridge demonstrated that coordinated civilian police collaboration not only enhances public safety, but also upholds professional integrity and legal compliance. Dr. Chin's development of comprehensive medical protocols to address criminal intimidation earned widespread adoption throughout the healthcare industry. Her framework offered a balanced approach, safeguarding patient care while supporting community safety. Healthcare providers must uphold professional ethics while contributing to public security, Dr. Chin emphasized during a medical staff training session. Our experience during the Devil's Hand confrontation allowed us to establish protocols that protect patient confidentiality while addressing broader safety concerns. The economic recovery of Cedar Ridge exceeded all expectations, showcasing how the removal of criminal influence can unlock economic potential. Mike's Diner and Thompson's Hardware reported steady growth in customer traffic, while new businesses began opening in previously neglected areas. Criminal organizations thrive on isolating business owners, Mike shared at a regional economic development conference. Cedar Ridge's coordinated resistance showed that maintaining business operations during a crisis requires strong community support and a united front. The municipal government embraced a new era of transparency, setting benchmarks for accountability and oversight. Regular public audits, enhanced governance protocols, and active civilian participation in decision-making became the bedrock of Cedar Ridge's administration. Effective governance depends on systematic accountability, the mayor stated at a municipal leadership symposium. Cedar Ridge demonstrated how transparent administration strengthens community resilience and sustains public trust. Sarah observed the far-reaching impact of these changes during her hospital shifts, noting how Cedar Ridge's transformation influenced healthcare practices statewide. Emergency departments across the region began implementing similar protection protocols while upholding the highest medical standards. These changes extend far beyond immediate security concerns, Sarah explained to her nursing staff. We've shown how healthcare facilities can serve as anchors for community resistance, fulfilling their dual role of providing medical care and supporting public safety. Cedar Ridge's experience became a national model for how communities can effectively resist organized criminal intimidation. Its combination of civilian coordination, professional law enforcement, and transparent governance demonstrated that even in the face of entrenched criminal influence, a united community can not only survive but thrive. The impact goes far beyond immediate security, Sarah explained to a group of visiting healthcare administrators. We've shown that medical facilities can serve as pillars of community resistance while staying true to their primary mission of delivering quality healthcare. This dual role strengthens both public health and public safety. Meanwhile, Marcus continued refining the community protection model, integrating lessons learned from Cedar Ridge into adaptable security protocols. His focus on civilian coordination over confrontation resonated strongly with communities grappling with emerging criminal threats. Sustainable security requires systematic community engagement, Marcus emphasized during a federal law enforcement consultation. Cedar Ridge's success proved that coordinated civilian efforts, supported by professional law enforcement, offer an effective shield against organized crime. The transformation of the old mining complex into a vibrant community center became a symbol of Cedar Ridge's broader influence on regional development. Other towns followed suit, repurposing abandoned industrial facilities into public resources, eliminating potential criminal strongholds and fostering communal growth. Cedar Ridge's victory over the Devil's Hand was more than a triumph of local security. It was a blueprint for resilience. The town's unique blend of civilian coordination, professional policing, and sustained community involvement became a replicable model for protecting vulnerable communities from organized crime. Their success inspired strategies nationwide, demonstrating how unity could dismantle criminal intimidation and build stronger, more connected communities. 6 months after the pivotal events, Sarah and Marcus found themselves seated at their usual booth in Mike's Diner. What was once a hub for criminal intimidation had evolved into a lively community gathering spot, its walls now showcasing local achievements and announcements for civic events. "Did you ever think it would end up like this?" Sarah asked, glancing at the diverse group of customers chatting and enjoying their meals without fear. The diner's windows, once fortified with bars, now stood open, welcoming light and community spirit. "The potential was always here," Marcus replied. His focus now shifted from immediate threats to sustaining the progress Cedar Ridge had made. This town just needed to realize its own strength. The most effective defense often comes from unity, not force. St. Michael's Hospital also reflected the town's transformation. The emergency department became a benchmark for integrating healthcare with community protection. Sarah's expanded role included training healthcare professionals from across the nation to adopt similar protocols. The medical community has embraced our integrated protection model, Dr. Chen reported during their monthly review meeting. 17 hospitals across 3 states have successfully implemented these protocols. More importantly, we've proven that healthcare facilities can uphold professional standards while actively contributing to community safety. Police Chief Davidson's departmental reforms earned national recognition, setting a new standard for rebuilding public trust in law enforcement. His focus on transparency, community engagement, and professional accountability provided a framework for police departments facing similar challenges. Effective policing thrives on trust and collaboration, Davidson remarked at a national law enforcement conference. Cedar Ridge showed how coordinated efforts between civilians and law enforcement can ensure public safety while maintaining integrity and compliance. Cedar Ridge's transformation wasn't just a victory over crime. It was a testament to the power of community. From the hospital to the diner, from the repurposed mining complex to the streets filled with confident residents, the town's collective strength became its greatest legacy. The lessons learned in Cedar Ridge now resonated far beyond its borders, shaping a new standard for resilience and cooperation in communities across the nation. Cedar Ridge demonstrated that effective law enforcement hinges on a genuine partnership with the community, Police Chief Davidson explained during a civic leadership meeting. Our success came from recognizing that public safety is built on mutual trust and sustained civilian cooperation. The federal investigation into the Devil's Hand concluded with remarkable success. Prosecutors secured convictions against 78 gang members, including leaders from multiple chapters. Even more notably, the evidence compilation methodology pioneered in Cedar Ridge became instrumental in dismantling affiliated criminal networks across 6 states. The community's systematic documentation set a new benchmark for civilian law enforcement collaboration. Lead federal prosecutor wrote in his final report, Cedar Ridge's approach offers a replicable framework for building solid cases against organized crime while upholding legal integrity. The town's business district experienced a renaissance under the new protection protocols. Mike's Diner expanded its operations to accommodate a surge in customers, and Thompson's Hardware opened a second location to meet growing demand. Previously avoided areas saw the arrival of new businesses, contributing to a vibrant economic revival. Criminal organizations thrive in isolation, Mike remarked during a Chamber of Commerce meeting. Cedar Ridge proved that coordinated community action can foster an environment where legitimate businesses thrive without fear of intimidation. The converted mining complex, now a thriving community center, stood as a powerful symbol of Cedar Ridge's transformation. Spaces once used for illicit activities now hosted youth programs, adult education classes, and civic organizations. The facility's success inspired similar initiatives in other communities facing comparable challenges. This is about more than removing criminal influence, Marcus explained to visiting civic leaders. It's about reclaiming spaces while creating resources that strengthen communities and prevent future vulnerability to organized intimidation. Sarah's unique perspective as both a healthcare provider and a community protector offered valuable insights into Cedar Ridge's healing process. Her work helped establish protocols addressing both physical and social trauma caused by criminal intimidation. Recovery demands comprehensive care, Sarah emphasized during a healthcare symposium. Cedar Ridge showed how medical facilities can play a pivotal role in community healing while maintaining professional standards. An integrated approach enhances both individual well-being and collective resilience. The municipal government's transparency initiatives further solidified Cedar Ridge's transformation. Regular public audits, stringent oversight protocols, and active civilian participation in governance ensured continued accountability and resilience. Effective governance relies on systematic accountability, the mayor stated during a regional leadership conference. Cedar Ridge demonstrated that transparent administration not only protects against criminal influence, but also strengthens public trust. As Sarah and Marcus finished their coffee at Mike's Diner, they watched the natural rhythm of the community unfold around them. Families gathered, business owners chatted, and neighbors exchanged greetings without fear. The once intimidated town had become a beacon of hope and unity, proving that a collective effort could overcome even the most entrenched challenges. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. If you found the story interesting and meaningful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any exciting content coming up. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. We're eager to hear from you. See you in the upcoming videos with more unique and meaningful stories. Stay with us.